Microsoft Patch Tuesday for March 2020. A new record was set. SMB version 3 Wormable remote code execution and updates for February goldies. Without a doubt, the hottest Microsoft vulnerability in March 2020 is the Wormable remote code execution and SMB version 3. The most commonly used names for this vulnerability are EternalDarkness, SMBGhost and CoronaBlue. There was a strange story of how it was disclosed. It seems like Microsoft accidentally mentioned it in their blog. Then they somehow found out that the patch for this vulnerability will not be released in the March Patch Tuesday. So they removed the reference to this vulnerability from the blog post as quickly as they could. But some security experts have seen it, and of course after EternalBlue and massive CryptoLocker attacks in 2017, each RC and SMB means, oh my god, this is happening again. We need to do something really fast. So Microsoft just had to publish an advisory for this vulnerability with the workaround and to release an urgent patch. So what is it about? If we have a vulnerable server, the attacker can send a specially crafted packet to the server and execute arbitrary code. This is the most interesting scenario. If we have a vulnerable client, the attacker can configure a malicious SMBv3 server and convince the user to connect to this server. So the attacker will be able to execute arbitrary code on this client host. What's the difference between EternalBlue MS17010 and this case? This vulnerability can be exploited because of SMB version 3 compression that only works in the latest versions of Windows 10 and Windows Server 1903 and 1909. This means the smaller number of potential targets. In the case of EternalBlue and MS17010, there was a real cyber weapon that was made and tested by NSA. And for this new vulnerability, we currently have only denial of service exploit. And there is a video of such exploitation in Crypto's Logic Twitter. Will a fully functional remote code execution exploit appear in the near future? Who knows? But it definitely won't hurt to fix this vulnerability as soon as possible. So how to fix this? To install the patch or switch off SMB version 3 compression as it is written in advisory. But this is not a recommended way anymore. How to detect this? There is an open source scanner for detecting SMB dialect 311 and compression capability. And commercial solutions already have plugins for detection. For example, Nessus plugins for remote and patch-based detection. Okay, now about the vulnerabilities in Patch Tuesday for March 2020. First of all, there are a lot of them. 115 CVEs. This is a new record and it's impossible to discuss each of them individually. So I will only mention the main groups. First of all, the different remote code executions. In each Patch Tuesday there are remote code executions in Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge. And usually the problem is in Chakra JavaScript engine. This time there are 13 remote code execution CVEs in Chakra core, and they can be potentially exploited if you visit a malicious site. Another group of remote code executions is related to some media files. These are vulnerabilities in Windows Graphic Device Interface, GDI, and Windows Media Foundation. They can be also used in a web-based attack, where an attacker convinces a user to visit some malicious website. There are also remote code executions in Microsoft Word, and one of them can be exploited simply by previewing a malicious file in Microsoft Outlook. But the most interesting issue is related to LNK files processing. When a user opens malicious share or removable drive, Windows Explorer parses the LNK file and malicious binary executes with the rights of a local user. Isn't this cool? And finally, there are many privilege escalation vulnerabilities that use different mechanisms, but all of them could be used to start processes with higher permissions after the initial user login. These vulnerabilities are in Windows Working Folder Service and Win32k. In February Patch Tuesday, I mentioned two most interesting vulnerabilities. Let's see if something has changed with them in a month. Microsoft Exchange Server Seizure. By sending a malicious email message, the attacker can run commands on a vulnerable Exchange server as the system user and monitor email communications. Quote, the attacker could completely take control of an Exchange server through a single email. Now this vulnerability has several exploits, including one in Metasploit. And there is news that this Microsoft Exchange server flaw exploited in APT attacks. You can see all these updates at vulnerabilities.com. The second one was mysterious Windows remote code execution. Quote, to exploit this vulnerability, an attacker who has a domain user account could create a specially crafted request, causing Windows to execute arbitrary code with elevated permissions, even without needing to directly log into the affected device. But for this vulnerability, nothing has changed in a month. Thank you very much for your time. Please subscribe and leave your comments.